Oh, woof.
Okay, so we'll stop freaking out.
There we go. We're done with that. So today we want to introduce someone very special. Actually, we've known each other for quite a while, on and off. We've been in the same circles for quite some time, and she is joining us today, and that is Debbie Montgomery Johnson. And she has many stories, but one of the most interesting stories, and I'm going to first have you introduce yourself and say hi to the audience.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I haven't been with these ladies in a long time. Very nice to be back.
Yes. And Debbie have written several books, but one of her first book really made an impact in the community and really brought something very important to the forefront that initially no one was paying attention to. And thank goodness that you were able to step up, because we all know there's a place of shame and fear. We stay quiet because we're embarrassed, but by you stepping up, you created a voice for so many other people.
And that's why I did it when I realized that it wasn't just my story. It was so many women's stories, and men also. Many men it's a relationship fraud is basically what we're talking about. And it was something that was foreign to me. I'd never heard of it. Right. And this was back in 2012, so it's been almost 12, 13 years. And it happened after my husband had passed away, and I was thrown into running his company, which it was interesting that I've recently talked more about the company than I ever did before, because I wasn't involved in Lou's company. And from one day he was alive, the next day he had died suddenly. I was thrown into running his company, taking care of the family, and I was consumed with trying to keep life going. And I did it the best I could by myself. My kids I have 4 children. The youngest was 15. He was at home. The older 3 were gone. And so I was working a day job at the elementary school that I was a treasurer for, and I was running the business. So essentially I was working 20 hours a day and exhausted. You're talking about being tired.
Yes.
I was just so exhausted, and the only time that I could really grieve his passing was at night when I got into bed alone and the sheets nothing moved. And I really got quite angry at him for dying, because he died suddenly. There was no anticipation, no preparation. And here is the preparation that I want everyone to know that's married, is if you have life insurance, make sure the premiums are paid. Because Luke canceled his life insurance 2 months before he died. And he died suddenly. We didn't know he was ill. He died of a sudden heart attack. And so he was transitioning from 55 to 56, and his insurance went up from $100 a month to $500 a month. And he goes, I don't want to pay that. We have investments, and I didn't want to have contention, so I just let it go. And then 2 months later he died, no insurance, and he had made such a fit about the insurance premium that when my father said, why don't you call them and see if you can, kind of pay in arrears? I'm like, there's this big red X over our name. There's no way I'm going to do that. And so it probably worked out for the best. Fast forward, after the scam. But it's something that I never want any of my friends to ever experience again, because many of our friends are entrepreneurs, solo entrepreneurs. Their wives don't run their businesses, or wives can't run their businesses necessarily. And without that cushion, I could have been out of a home and had a lot of really bad things happen. Bad. Wow. So what happened with me, though, is because I was so busy running the company, which I called his company until probably just a few years ago, and I've had it longer than he did, and running a day job at the school, and keeping the family going, and I had so many things that I got distracted about 6 months after he died, and my friends were like, you need a life. Well, they wanted me to start dating again. I was 52 years old. I really didn't want to start dating again. I didn't know how to start dating again. Really, I'd been married almost 26 years. And so they're like, oh, get into online dating, it's safe. I did a little bit of stalking myself. I went to a faith-based site thinking that would be safe. Wow. And I did it very carefully. I would say now, make sure you have a dating buddy. Have somebody that can help you out, that is a little more objective. because what I've found over these years, and if you want to know the whole story, this is the book that you were talking about that I wrote back in 2016. And it was the story of how I got involved in an online relationship, but felt it was safe because he wasn't here. Again, I'd been married for so long. I wasn't ready for somebody in person necessarily, but I did want to have a companion.
Yes.
Excuse me, somebody I could talk about the business, someone I could talk about the kids, someone I could talk to about him dying, about Lou dying.
Yes.
Because the gentleman that I was in contact with had lost his wife. He was from England. He was an international businessman, all the fun things that I thought would be great for me.
Right.
But also he wasn't here. He was in the United States and then left and went to do some work over in the Far East. I thought that was pretty exotic, pretty fun. And he, again, being from London, I had friends in London and we had a lot to talk about. So we did that for 2 years. And people were like, whatever happened? Why didn't he come? It was a roller coaster because he was supposed to come and then he didn't. We had plans to bring his sister and his son over, and at the very end, something happened and they couldn't get here. And so it was this roller coaster of emotions. And again, I got mad at that too.
Right.
But you just have to go with the flow.
Right.
And so I did what I could. And in the meantime, this is where I was too kind, probably, too trusting, is that we started talking about business, about companies. And he would ask me questions. How do you write a business plan? How do you do this? What do you do in your company as far as such and such? So we would be creating these businesses. And because he was working overseas and got involved in customs and tariffs and things that I really didn't have experience in. I had been a paralegal. I had worked for the Air Force and intelligence. I had a really great background, but I didn't know specifically in business what he was doing. When something came up with his company and they had a shipping issue or a tariff issue between Malaysia and India, I had to take his word. I had to trust what he was telling me, that is what was happening. But he also is in financial bind because, as we know many times, you get paid when your job is completed.
Correct.
Not prior to completing.
Right.
And so there are a lot of asks, but they weren't personal. I mean, I wasn't giving money away to this man. I was investing in his business. We were doing things, and I was always assured, not guaranteed, that I would get paid back. And that was the premise I went on. So fast forward 2 years, and on September 10th, 2012, I get a message from him that, how did he put it? He goes, "How do you feel about forgiveness?" And we'd had very spiritual experiences over the years, and I'm thinking, okay, so I put on my spiritual hat and I started telling him everything I thought about forgiveness, and you put your money where your mouth is, right?
Right.
And about 2 hours in, we got disconnected, and then a little bit later he came back on. What were we talking about? And I reiterated it and paraphrased what I had thought we were talking about in the morning. And I said, "Why are we talking about forgiveness? Have I done something wrong?" And I look back now going, why did I think I had done something wrong?
Right.
But I did. And he goes, "No, I have something to tell you that's going to hurt you." And at that, I'm thinking, oh, you really don't need to do this. I don't need to be hurt again. He said, "Deb, I have a confession to make." And at that moment, I had this gut punch, because I had heard that phrase in my 26 years of marriage once. And it wasn't a good thing. I got over it, but it wasn't good. And so when I heard I have a confession, and I'm thinking, oh no, he said, "Deb, I have to confess to you that I have lied for the last 2 years. This is a scam." And when I heard that, I'm thinking, well, what happened to my Eric and Kenny, which was his son, and Mary, and all these people I'd gotten to know over these years? How could this possibly be a scam? And he goes, "I'm really sorry." And I'm sorry. I said, "I gave you over $1 million over these last 2 years. What's with that?" And people are probably, that's when you hear this vacuum go. I didn't have $1 million to give to him. I came up with it. And this is the thing about relationship frauds, is that when someone has ingratiated themselves into your family, you really start trusting them. And I would do almost anything for my family. I would find the money to help my family. I sold jewelry. I sold investments. I sold whatever, and to help him along. And with the assurance again that I was going to get it back, I got rid of retirement accounts, which I took huge penalties on. You don't think about those things because you're so into it. And here's the thing: there's such victim blame and shame that I've learned over the years. I'm an advocate now with SCARS, which is the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. We work with victims around the world. And everybody goes through the same feelings that, oh my gosh, how stupid was I? How did I do this? How did I get taken? There's an art and a psychology to this scam. It's called grooming. And if within 2 weeks you've gotten online and all the endorphins are going and you're feeling really great and you're getting these wonderful messages, if you don't see the person within 2 weeks, it's most likely a scam. And as we were talking earlier, a lot of times it's military. There are military pictures. There are international businessmen. There are people on oil rigs. There are some basic things that they use. They could be a doctor working with the UN over somewhere. And over the past few years, with all the wars going on in the Middle East, it's very easy because I'm former military. I wouldn't have been necessarily taken by a military scam. Business person, yes, but many women in particular are being taken by the military because there's something about the uniform and you trust them. I mean, I was active duty Air Force for years. I was married to an Air Force officer. My kids are active duty. There's a feeling of patriotism, and these guys couldn't possibly be lying to me. Well, unfortunately, the scammers do. They create these stories, and they'll come up with, well, you have to pay me. Please send me money so I can get a ticket home. Right. Military never needs a ticket home. Okay. There are basic things that the military takes care of, but the scammers know enough. And I don't like to call them scammers because that kind of minimizes what they are. They're organized criminals, and they are making trillions of dollars from unwitting folks around the world, and it's just heart-wrenching because now, in today's world, back in 2010, 2012, it's mostly wire transfers. It transitioned into gaming cards or gift cards, into gift cards. Now it's cryptocurrency, and it's actually called pig butchering, which is kind of an odd name.
Sorry, what is it called?
Pig butchering.
Oh, pig butchering.
It came out of
China.
Came across that, because if you think about fattening up the pig.
Pig, yes.
You fatten up the pig for a butcher. And so they call it pig butchering, and it's investment scam. So you don't necessarily go into this thinking that you're going to find someone that you're going to love, but you go in thinking, well, I want to learn how to do cryptocurrency and trading. Well, that all crashed and burned. But it was very interesting how that pulled in the millennials and the folks that have grown up on the internet who think that they're, they know what to do, that they're safe, they can guide themselves through. And it's been devastating because the young folks now are losing their retirements.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why did this guy confess to you that it was a scam? Do you think that he started to genuinely care for you and he just needed to come clean, or was that his modus operandi, like he would get money from somebody and then why do you think that was?
It's interesting because typically they don't confess.
Right.
So I'm with you. The goodness of me wanted to believe that it was because he had developed feelings for me, and that might be true. Dr. McGinnis, Tim McGinnis, could say that could have been part of the scam after the fact also.
Right.
But mostly they don't typically confess. And he actually confessed and then came online, and I saw him in person, which for 2 years I'd said, can we Zoom? Can we do this?
Was the picture, was it the original person?
No,
or was it someone else?
No, those pictures are stolen.
So for 2 years you were speaking to this person and you could never see who you were speaking to?
Back then in 2010, 2012, it was mostly via email. There wasn't much text. We didn't text back then.
Right.
It was instant message on Yahoo Chat.
Right.
And it was like we would talk. When I say talk, we were typing for hours. And we talked about everything from children to business to spouses passing away to you name it, our plans for the future. And so I kept a journal. I love to write, but back then it was journaling. I have 5 volumes of journal, 4,000 pages of evidence, as the FBI called it, but there's nothing I could do about it. Because when he did confess, and that's when I said, now you're lying. I said, prove to me that this is really the truth. He said, I'm going to come on. There's a camera on Yahoo Chat. Who knew that, right? And he walked me through pulling up this camera, and I'm looking at my computer screen, hoping to see my handsome Brit, and up pops this young, dark-haired, dark-eyed, dark-skinned young
From
man.
where?
From Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Not once in 2 years did I hear Nigeria. It was
Wow.
London. It was India. It was, working
So
in Malaysia.
he spoke with what you would have considered
But
genuine
you're not talking,
British
you're
accent.
texting.
But when I did talk to him on the phone, he had a British accent. Well, so did the
Ah.
Nigerians.
But that makes sense.
Right.
But piggybacking on that story, like I was telling you earlier, I would get, I think it was through Facebook, one of those, hi, how you doing? You're so beautiful. I'd like to get to meet you. And they're also sweet, that sweetness. And you're right, single women are like, oh, okay. So you look at a picture, you go, ooh, cute guy, whatever. And then, of course, but few things went off for me. I said, why does all your pictures look like you're posing for a magazine? Because he had all of these real nice poses. So, my mind, because I'm an overthinker, and I would research something to death. I'll go way back. So then I started asking questions, and and of course he has, he's divorced. The wife is here with. Oh no. The wife died, but
They're typically widows.
The child
widowers.
is with a grandparent or something here. And so we're kind of talking, but now I'm getting, because thanks to you, because I know what you went through, so I'm being a little bit cautious. And so finally, I'm like, so take a picture. So his story was, he was I think in Afghanistan, and he was taking care of an orphanage of all these kids, and they had nowhere to go. And I could see where he's trying to get to the point to start asking for money, but I kept asking other questions. And finally, at some point, I said, well, take a picture of your environment. Let me see what it looks like. And he just says, oh, we're not allowed classified. And I'm like, yeah, no, not really. And then finally I said, well, you have a kid, send me a picture of your kid. Because which parent doesn't have a picture of their kids, right? So it took him it took a while, 20 minutes, almost half an hour, and boom, the picture shows up. And the picture is filled with watermarks from, obviously, he Googled a cute little child and he sends it to me. I work on the computer all the time. I know what to look for. I Photoshop stuff. And as soon as I saw that, boom, block. So now I'm getting a lot of those weird names, but I would go back and see how far back they've been on that thread and who's liking the pictures. Then I follow the people that's liking the pictures, and just by following them, you're going, these are all people from Nigeria, from Africa, from somewhere else. And you're going, the connection, this is not working.
You've got to be really
Luck.
careful. That brings up a really good point too. Those of us that are grandmas, we love to share pictures of grandchildren. Don't do that, because the scammers can
They're
actually
using
go in
it.
and they
Go
can
and take
copy
those
those pictures and
pictures,
make
yes.
profiles of families. And that's really dangerous. And also, we're in women's groups. Be
Right.
really careful what friend requests you accept, because it's going to show as a mutual friend. They only have to get one friend
Right.
that becomes a mutual friend, and now they've infiltrated that women's group. And that's happened to a couple of groups I'm with, one over in Australia, New Zealand, and then here in the States. So they're very clever. They think differently than we do, and they have no heart. Their job, if you think about it, they are the consummate salesman. They have a job. Their job is to get money from you, and they are very good at what they do. The pig butchering scam, the investment scams, don't take as much time, and they don't invest their heart. Whereas the romance, the relationships scams are really, they're heartfelt. And that's the most devastating thing for me as an advocate now, is to see the 65, 77-year-olds who've lost their retirements, who've lost their homes now. They've lost their heart because it's been ripped
so
out from underneath them.
disappointing.
And it leads to suicide.
Yes.
And that's really devastating. So we need to keep our ears open for our neighbors and our girlfriends, saying, what are
Right.
they saying? Because especially when you start into online dating, there's still, I think, a little bit of a stigma, not necessarily for the young folks, because that's the only way they're dating now, but the older gals, because if they start getting involved and they might be sending money, they're going to stop talking to you about it. They don't want anybody to know,
Right.
because the scammers will say, now, don't tell anybody, because they're going to be the naysayers. Don't let anybody know that you're sending. I did that to my own children, to my next door neighbor. When my kids start saying, don't, I'm thinking, I'm you're treating me like a 2-year-old. Leave me alone.
Right.
And then I stopped communicating with my kids about what was
Right.
going on. I almost lost one of my best friends because of this.
Yes.
And I have lost friends over the years because when it came out and I started to talk about it, they didn't understand why I was bringing it up. And it was because of ladies like you. I want you to have heard that story, because the hardest thing I have to deal with is when someone writes to me and said, Deb, thanks so much for telling your story, but I wish I had heard it before.
Before.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
it kind of sounds to me like also abusive relationships, where they try to isolate you from your family and your friends, and you know, try to make themselves the center of your life so they can control it. And then people always say, well, why did you stay, or why did you? They don't understand what happens in abusive relationships. It is very psychological.
You get so drawn in.
It is.
And you don't
And it's
want
also
to think
scary.
badly of them.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and
Because
there's
you are a
some
good
fear.
person.
Absolutely.
And you want to see the good in other people.
Absolutely.
But it's so brave of you, and you know, you've helped so many people by sharing your story. And hopefully, you know, with women and men who have not only survived that scam, but you know, hopefully prevented people from falling for this scam. But you have some more books there. Do you want to quickly tell us about
I
them?
have. Sure. Well, I love to write, and I write monthly for a magazine called Positive Tribe. And Candy Parker is part of Women's Prosperity
Right,
Network, and
yes.
Candy does that. So this book is actually like a year or two's worth of my monthly essays, but I love writing for her. This book here, this was the last, well, that's the company one. This is the last one. This was fun because this isn't my story, but there are a lot of me and a lot of my friends inside this. And this is about being fearless. It's standing up and just doing what you want to do. If you love to be if you're physical and you love dancing, but you might consider yourself a little bit overweight, who cares what anybody else says? Be fearless. Do what gives you joy. And that's what this book is about. And there's kind of a fun ending in the back, but it is a gift called Fearless, and I think we all need to have that in us. This is the latest little book, and this is called Your Amazing Itty Bitty. And this is the Women's Prosperity
WPN,
Network group.
yes,
There's
I remember.
15 of us. And this is the first time I actually wrote about the company. And my company, we have a vitamin supplement for diabetics, typically diabetics, people that have neuropathy. And this past year, the vitamin supplement is called benfotiamine. It's a fat-soluble form of vitamin B1. It's been researched, or it's in research now, for Alzheimer's, for slowing down the progression of Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's by researchers is considered diabetes type 3.
Right.
And so I decided to be brave. I owned the company after all, 13 years now. I do call it my own company. But I'm like, you know what? We all have family members that either have diabetes, they have neuropathy, they have something. And it's turning into a generational thing because of the way we cook
Yes.
and the way we eat,
Yes.
overeat. And I want people to understand that it can be changed. We can slow it down. And this is just a marvelous, it was lots of fun to write.
Commercial. Well, thank you so much, Debbie.
Yeah.
We had such a great time. Thank you. This was extremely
Extremely
educational.
informative, yes.
We do have to go to a commercial break right now. So as soon as we come back, yes, that was Debbie. And if you have any questions, we will be adding it to our link on YouTube and Facebook if you need to reach out to Debbie and, find out some more information. I mean, I'm sure there's more people might want some deeper information from you, Debbie. So thank you so much for coming into our show.
Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to my channel Dr. Karina Felix for more videos.